By the mid-1960s, the Beatles were no longer just a band. They were a phenomenon. Their fame had outgrown their own understanding of it. But beneath the chaos of screaming fans and flashing cameras, there was still something sacred at the core. Four men, who when they worked together, could make something greater than any one of them alone. And according to their producer George Martin, there was one song that captured that magic perfectly. The song, he said, showed the Beatles at their best, much better than the individual. That song was A Hard Day's Night. The year was 1964. The Beatles were at the height of Beatlemania, touring the world, filming their first movie, recording their third album, and barely sleeping in between. They were exhausted, running on adrenaline and instinct. One night, Ringo Starr stumbled into a studio session late and mumbled half-jokingly, "Phew, it's been a hard day's night." Everyone laughed. Then John Lennon looked up. He said, "That's it." That phrase, nonsense and genius in equal measure, became the title of their next song, their next film, and, unknowingly, a symbol of their unity. George Martin would later recall, "It was pure Beatles, accidental, spontaneous, and perfect." John Lennon wrote A Hard Day's Night in a single night, sitting in his London flat with his guitar balanced on his knee. He had a deadline. Director Richard Lester needed the title song for the film immediately. By morning, he had it. When Lennon played it for Paul McCartney, Paul added a few harmony lines, suggested a shift in phrasing, and together they finished it. Two voices, one mind. It was fast, melodic, full of energy, pure pop, yet already pushing into something deeper. "That's what they did best," George Martin said. "John had the spark, Paul brought the polish, and the rest made it shine." It was Lennon's melody, Paul's structure, George Harrison's inventiveness, and Ringo's pulse, four distinct forces forming one heartbeat. Before the lyrics, before the melody, there's that sound. The one that opens the song explodes like a flashbulb and vanishes in a second. That opening chord. A mystery that's been analyzed, debated, and dissected for decades. George Harrison struck it on his 12-string Rickenbacker, while George Martin doubled it with piano notes underneath, carefully layered to create something sharp and electric, neither major nor minor, both at once. "It was an accident of brilliance," Martin later said. "That chord told you this wasn't just another pop record, it was something alive." The chord didn't just start the song, it announced the Beatles, confident, unified, untouchable. When the Beatles entered Abbey Road to record A Hard Day's Night, they were a machine, not mechanical, but instinctive. Each member played for the song, not for themselves. John's rhythm guitar carried the drive. Paul's bass danced around the melody, playful yet precise. Ringo's drumming was tight, swinging, full of personality. And George's solo, fast, bright, elegant, fit like clockwork. But it was George Martin's role that turned it from great to legendary. He arranged the harmonies, balanced the mix, and sharpened the pacing to perfection. He knew exactly how to capture the energy of four young men who didn't even realize how extraordinary they were. "It wasn't about control," Martin said. "It was about listening, letting them be themselves, but guiding them just enough to turn instinct into art." When John and Paul sang together, something happened that neither could reproduce alone. Their voices, one rough and nasal, the other smooth and melodic, collided and fused into something entirely new. George Martin always said that blend was their greatest gift. When they sang in unison, you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began, he said. It was like hearing friendship itself. On A Hard Day's Night, their dual vocals carried the track, full of youthful exhaustion, confidence, and joy. It sounded spontaneous, but it was deliberate, a perfect expression of Lennon and McCartney's chemistry at its peak. For Martin, that unity was sacred. It reminded him why the Beatles were special, not because they were the best players, but because together they became something beyond technical perfection. It was alchemy, he said, 4 elements that shouldn't work, but did. When A Hard Day's Night was released, it became an instant global sensation. The film broke records, the album topped charts, and the single shot to #1 in both the UK and the US. the first time any band had achieved that double victory. But for George Martin, the real success wasn't commercial. It was spiritual. That song proved what they could do together, he reflected years later. None of them alone could have made it work. It was the Beatles as a single organism, much better than the individual. That was the essence of the Beatles, their ability to turn differences into harmony. Lennon's sarcasm, McCartney's optimism, Harrison's curiosity, Ringo's humor, and Martin's steady hand keeping them in orbit. By the time the Beatles reached their final years, that unity began to fade. Solo projects, creative clashes, and exhaustion took their toll. But George Martin never forgot that moment in 1964, when 4 young men and 1 producer captured lightning in a bottle. "If you want to know what the Beatles were truly about," he said, "don't look at their solo albums. Listen to A Hard Day's Night. That's what they sounded like when everything worked. It wasn't their most complex song. It wasn't their most ambitious. But it was pure, the sound of joy, youth, and perfect balance." Even decades later, when asked to name the track that defined them, Martin didn't hesitate. "It was the sound of 4 minds moving as one," he said, "and that's why A Hard Day's Night was the Beatles at their best."